You're watching highlights of the Lakewood City Council meeting on July 6, 2026. Follow your local governments at cgov.org.
Council budget priorities did not just appear on the page. They went through weeks of Finance Committee discussion and planning. Vice President Baker walked everyone through how those ideas were shaping the path toward the 2027 budget.
The Finance Committee met on June 22nd and June 29th to review and discuss the 24 council budget priorities that were submitted to the following the council's retreat on May 11th. Priorities address a wide range of topics, some of which build upon existing investments, whereas others offer brand new ideas. Conversations about the priorities were informal and open-ended among council members and the administration. During the discussion, the committee gained more clarity on which priorities will realistically impact the 2027 budget, and those that do not have the budget impact will be pursued as policy objectives or as long-term projects starting in 2027. At least one additional Finance Committee will be held before the council recess, which was today, to review the remaining priorities and develop our path forward in this process. I plan to place a more detailed report on this process on the June 20th docket.
Zoning rules might soon change in ways that affect everything from repair projects to damaged garages in your neighborhood. Councilmember Evans shared how the latest code updates were taking shape and what timeline residents were looking at.
Assistant Director Boss provided an overview of the proposed changes to the zoning code regarding procedures and definitions chapters that were discussed in the 5th meeting of the Zoning and Planning Advisory Committee. He also reviewed the next steps and final timeline of the project, sharing that they plan to have a final cohesive draft of the proposed zoning code updates ready for the September docket. He said the goal is to have council adopt any associated legislation by the end of the year. The presentation was timely given the status of the zoning refresh project and the potential to make updates to the zoning code that might allow homeowners and landlords more flexibility when it comes to replacing damaged garages. The committee is thankful to the bridge builder team for sharing their findings, and we will continue to analyze the matter until we can narrow down a solution that addresses the unique challenges of our community.
E-bikes and e-scooters had turned into a hot topic at City Hall as council members wrestled with how to keep up with fast-changing streets. Here's how they started charting new rules and why they pushed to move quickly.
Today we met, will be the first in several meetings that discuss potential ordinance changes, code and ordinance changes regarding e-bikes and e-scooters. This is something that is very timely and important to the community. The kind of explosion of these devices around town is obvious, and people just aren't sure or unaware or maybe blissfully unaware of their rules around these things. So we're looking at everything from definitions of how these are defined in the codes, to ways that we can regulate their use, where and what can be done with them. But one thing we did here today, and we understand and we need to work on together, is that we do have ordinances that prohibit reckless operation of all these devices on the books. So we're hoping to work with the administration and the police department on an education blitz to get the word out there that it is not a free-for-all when you're riding an e-scooter or bike. So that in the meantime, while we're working on adjusting these codes and ordinances, we do have the power to make sure these things are operated safely around the city.
We did have quite a bit of discussion about the sort of moped, for lack of a better word, and about children riding them and concerns, particularly some of those devices go well above what a normal e-bike goes, and a lot of these kids are riding them on the sidewalk. And so we've heard a lot from the community about that, and just wanting to note that that is on our radar, and discussion that this whole ordinance may not need to be finished before there's some work on that separately as well. So
I see a case board member, Emily Lindberg, in the audience who's made the argument that it's not the class of vehicle, but the behavior that should drive how we govern this. I think that's an important thought. I think Mr. Boss also thought there was merit to that idea. I guess what I'd like to do, though, is urge the administration and council to work swiftly on this, even as it's deliberating in case, because we don't have time to follow a slow, methodical process. I think we need to move swiftly while also being methodical and thoughtful. So this is what I think they mean by sausage making. We got to push from city council side of things while we're working with the administration, because enforcement and education and communication is probably 80% of what needs to happen.
Charter changes did not move forward lightly. City Council spent months debating what should ultimately land on your November ballot. Councilmember Keppel walked through how those recommendations were narrowed down and what they meant for future council salaries.
In 2024, after extensive review, research and discussion, the Citizen-led Charter Review Commission recommended changes around 6 topics. Since then, City Council has held multiple meetings in Committee of the Whole with extensive deliberation and thoughtful dialogue. After making various amendments, Committee of the Whole ultimately passed ordinances related to 5 of the 6 topics favorably out of committee. The following 5 ordinances, if passed, would send proposed ballot language to the Board of Elections to place on the November ballot. But then the main thing is changes, as we had discussed, to the odd-numbered years for when the salary recommendations are reviewed by Civil Service Commission, but it puts back in the 10% salary cap so that there's no increase in salary unless there has been an increase in salary for that office, unless there's not been an increase in salary in that office. The preceding
City Council turned to a charter amendment that would reshape how future vacancies on the council were filled. This brief reading from the clerk explained what voters were being asked to weigh in on.
An ordinance to take effect immediately, submitting to the electors of the City of Lakewood an amendment to the Third Amended Charter of the City of Lakewood in order to add additional requirements to the process by which council appoints new members to fill a vacancy.
Another proposed charter change quietly targeted the fine print of how City Council could revise its own laws. This brief reading from the clerk set up a question for voters. Should amending legislation be a little less cumbersome?
An ordinance to take effect immediately, submitting to the electors of the City of Lakewood an amendment to the Third Amended Charter of the City of Lakewood in order to change the manner in which legislation is amended and to remove the requirement that the entire ordinance or resolution be repealed, then a new ordinance or resolution be enacted.
City Council turned to a charter change that could reshape how ward boundaries are drawn in the years ahead. The clerk's reading put a new redistricting proposal directly in voters' hands.
An ordinance to take effect immediately, submitting to the electors of the City of Lakewood an amendment to the Third Amended Charter of the City of Lakewood in order to establish a process and requirement for ward redistricting in the City of Lakewood.
Even the city's charter, the blueprint for local government, ended up back on the editing table. This moment showed how leaders fine-tuned a ballot proposal to clarify exactly how that charter could be changed in the future.
Item 8, Ordinance 2026. An ordinance to take effect immediately, submitting to the electors of the City of Lakewood an amendment to the Third Amended Charter of the City of Lakewood in order to clarify the various paths in which the charter can be amended.
So this one we have a substitute. It corrects the typo in the third whereas clause, and then there's also some language in section 7.5b where you can see it's crossed out as to the submission of the question of choosing a charter commission. That's in there currently, but it's actually not relevant to this section. So that's kind of correcting a previous typo, so to speak, and then updates the proposed ballot language in section 3, as you can see. So it kind of renumbers there.
A council member raised the alarm about a quiet federal rule change that could reshape how grants flow to cities, schools, and nonprofits. Stick around to hear why they urged everyone, on and off council, to speak up before the deadline.
Dear colleagues, I want to draw your attention to the potential overhaul of the federal financial assistance via a proposed rule by the Office of Management and Budget, OMB. The Code of Federal Regulations, 2 CFR 200, otherwise known as Uniform Guidance, provides agency-wide policies and requirements related to financial assistance, which include grants, cooperative agreements, and other funding mechanisms. The purpose of the proposed OMB changes is to 1. Improve transparency, accountability, and oversight, 2. Clarify status of OMB's policies, and 3. Reduce recipient burden. These sweeping changes are alarming in that it has the potential to fundamentally alter and change the federal grant-making landscape. Section 200.300, limits on DEI, gender ideology, and discrimination, would ensure that grant funds and subawards are not used to fund or promote illegal DEI, gender ideology, or the gender transition of a person under age 19. Section 200.218, disparate impact, would prohibit the use of disparate impact studies, litigation, or other related activities related to disparate impact liability. Ultimately, these proposed changes will remove uniform guidance as the guide and change it to regulation and limit the autonomy of federal agencies, in addition to the consolidation of grant-making decisions, and put them in the hands of political appointees. If these changes are implemented, there will be significant impacts all over, from nonprofits to higher education to school districts and local government to business, affecting health and human services, education, mental health and substance use services, to our research landscape. No one will be untouched, as this would also include pass-through funding, otherwise known as sub-awards, and not just direct awards made. The comment period is open and will close on July 13th. I'm encouraging everyone, all of my council colleagues, please, to go to the Federal Register regulation for federal financial assistance and make a public comment. And for members of the public, there is a link, that direct link that you can go to and make a public comment as well. By law, each comment has to be considered, so please make your comments count.
After that warning about a federal rule change, Councilmember Keppel pressed for answers, questioning the stated purpose of the proposal and what illegal DEI was supposed to mean. Hear how this back and forth sharpened the focus on public engagement and transparency.
I just wanted to clarify, on the first page, it says the purpose of these changes are these three things. Is this the alleged purpose of these changes? Because it doesn't seem like the changes you list actually would be accomplishing. And do you know if they define what illegal DEI is?
So if you actually go to the Federal Register, if you go to that link, it's filled with a lot of propaganda, and it's essentially they're saying that diversity, equity, and inclusion, anything it's illegal.
And I'll just note too, the section talking about removing the need for public engagement about the group affected by the award is absolutely backwards, as we're looking to increase public engagement. So thank you for bringing this to attention. I'll certainly add a comment myself.
Short-term rentals had quietly multiplied across Lakewood, and neighbors were starting to feel the impact. Councilmember Bullock opened the door to new rules and some big questions about how Airbnbs should fit into residential streets.
Members of council, please see attached to the proposed ordinance to continue our consideration of potential rules to regulate Lakewood properties seeking to operate as Airbnbs or short-term rentals. This proposal is a starting point intended to reinitiate deliberation by council begun last year and via public input the community at large. Although it is not clear that short-term rental operation in Lakewood is illegal and permitted use, the practice has exploded in recent years. While the city of Lakewood knows of several dozen such properties, an informal search on commercial short-term rental websites reveals several hundred being made available for short-term rental. City Council and City Hall have received an increasing number of complaints about the presence and operation of short-term rentals in our neighborhoods, who are reported to result in a range of impacts ranging from middling to severe, such as altered neighborhood character, parking impacts, eroded perceptions of safety, greater pressure on housing affordability, and at times large and disruptive parties, chronic nuisance behaviors, or outright crime.
After outlining the rise of short-term rentals, Councilmember Bullock dug into the fine print of what new rules could actually look like. From owner occupancy to school buffers, this proposal spelled out how tightly Lakewood might rein in Airbnbs.
Lakewood's existing laws also limit the number of days guests may stay, require off-street parking, and prohibit rentals for, quote, special gatherings and parties. There's wedding receptions, I think, are included as well, among other regulations. To my knowledge, no property currently operating in Lakewood has been granted such a conditional use permit, although I'd be happy to work with the planning department to confirm that, and may not even have applied. We also know that many short-term rental properties are operating in single-family and single and two-family districts. Next, I'll keep going. Next, to prioritize the availability of Lakewood housing stock for long-term residents as prices as affordable as possible, rather than profit maximizing. Next, to provide protect character, parking access, and the perception of safety in residential neighborhoods zoned for residential use. Next, the ordinance proposed here as a starting point would require a conditional use permit, clarifying that short-term rentals are included in the definition of bed and breakfast establishment, which is a term of art in our code. Next, require owner occupancy. Next, prohibit any short-term rentals inside condominiums or other multifamily apartment buildings, 3 suites or larger. Next, prohibit short-term rentals within 1,500 feet of a school, and establish requirements for compliance with safety, quality, informational disclosure, and establish a means of accountability of conditions and operations of the property fell short of the requirements.
When short-term rentals were officially put on the books as a bed and breakfast use, the real question became what kind of neighbor they should be. This moment captured how Councilmember Bullock framed the choice Lakewood residents now faced about ARMs on residential streets.
Item 14, Ordinance 28, 2026, an ordinance to take effect immediately clarifying that short-term rentals are a form of bed and breakfast establishment pursuant to Lakewood Codified Ordinance 116103C and establishing additional criteria regulating this conditional use.
Do we think it's an amenity that is important to preserve the operation of? Or do we think it is something that impacts residential zone districts in a way that deserves special care and oversight? And I don't know that there's a right answer to that other than what we as a community want to decide. This gets into the classic dilemmas of zoned districts, what the law allows in a zoned district, and what exceptions could be allowed in those zone districts and what processes we follow to consider those exceptions. I am sympathetic to neighbors who bought in a residential neighborhood under the existing residential rules and then later are experiencing commercial operations impacting them without their consent. And in this case, really without notice, because we don't even have procedures to invite public input as we would when we're following a conditional use permit.
Even a simple agenda item got tripped up by a tangle of liquor paperwork and missing reports. Council paused to sort out what was going on before deciding how to move forward.
Don't think we have the report on this one yet. Is that correct?
That's correct, Madam President. We finally got the paperwork.
I mean, you guys have been a little busy, so but thank you. I know there's been some trouble getting things from the liquor control and back and forth. So yeah.
For some reason, this one's been exceptional. We've probably, as clerk box, been a great help. This one's been a challenge.
And we don't have the next one either, right? Is that correct? Okay. All right. Great. All right. So I will move to defer.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor? Aye. And that motion passes.
A longtime Lakewood resident stepped up to the mic with a harrowing story about repeated power outages and a health emergency that followed. Stay with this one. It raised urgent questions about the city's relationship with its utility provider and what happens if nothing changes.
My name is Don Nottage, and my wife Renee and I have been Lakewood residents for over 25 years. Prior to that, my family had moved to Lakewood in 1974 from the east side of Cleveland. My grandfather, Alex Momrick, along with his father, were builders of many houses in Lakewood going back to the 1920s. In all that time, I've never experienced the conditions I was put through on July 1st, 2nd, and 3rd. Let's cut to the chase. Over those 3 days, our power was shut off without warning 4 times. During that time, we were sent vague, half-hearted apologies by First Energy concerning repair schedules, as well as AI-generated phone calls saying that there would be quote-unquote planned outages for 1 hour and subsequently 4 to 5 hours with power. That was a lie. Our power was out for over 6 hours each time. I'm a severe asthma sufferer, and we have medically indicated air purifiers in our house. Due to the rapidly rising heat and humidity, my breathing situation started to become critical. None of my rescue medications were working. Our Verizon service was also down. I became faint, dizzy, and started to have cognitive issues. My wife helped me into the car, and we rushed to the Lakewood ER on Detroit. I was treated for dehydration, heat stroke, and asthma symptoms that were addressed. We were in the ER for over 4 hours. It's time for creative solutions to be enacted, including lawsuits and exploring the enlistment of a different utility provider instead of Lakewood continuously kicking this issue down the road and pointing fingers. And in my opinion, it's frankly irresponsible to build more multi-unit apartment complexes all over the city that will even further stress this failing power grid. If this situation isn't more creatively addressed by this body, people could very well die. I almost did.
After that emotional testimony about life-threatening power outages, City Hall did not stay silent. Councilmember Keppel and Mayor George laid out how the city was pushing back on its utility and what tools they actually had to work with.
And I just want to acknowledge, first of all, that I'm sorry for everything that you went through. Many of our residents did. We heard from a lot. I spent those 3 days, I know, and Vice President Baker did as well, and other council members of responding to folks in the mayor's office as well.
Well, I want to say thank you for being here, and I'm sorry that this has happened to you. I truly am. As I've said many times, and as I've spoken to First Energy, we are talking about life and death here. There are people with your issues, your wife issues, and it needs to be addressed. First, I want to set the stage is that the Public Utilities Commission of Ohio is the regulatory agency for utilities. So through them is the only way that we can effectuate change through First Energy. And as of today, I have submitted another complaint to PUCO regarding the these last power outages. And just a few things I want to highlight. I've now asked for additional financial components to the matter, which include I'm requesting significant direct fines to First Energy, refunds of payments to ratepayers, and other creative options such as an escrow system that will withhold all ratepayer utility bill payments until the issues in Lakewood are fully resolved. So I just want you to know, it may seem like it's behind the scenes, but we are working, the law department is working, we are working very hard to push First Energy as hard as we can and work to have PUCO really come down on this corrupt entity.
After that tense exchange over repeated power outages, the conversation turned to what comes next: communication and pressure. This moment showed how city leaders and residents pushed for clear updates while stressing that public comments were already changing the story with First Energy.
Thank you, Mayor, for your efforts. And please keep everyone in the loop. Keep your constituents in the loop through the website or whatever, and make sure people are understanding and that they can have some peace of mind for the future. Because this was bad, as we know. And there's a lot of ripple effects occurring around this. So thank you for your efforts. Please continue.
We do a lot of really good work at the city. And so we did talk today about maybe getting a website together, about First Energy, putting the timeline together, about resources for individuals. So we are working to make that improvement because it is important for all of our residents to know all of this work that's being done, and we're fighting hard for all of you.
When they came to us and said, you know, we're going to try to do better on one side in the public, and then behind the scenes we're saying, but we're going to try to lower these reliability standards. And so, you know, they made their announcement that they were delivering that new transformer the day before this decision came out in the papers that PUCO had denied their request to lower their standards. So they can put out a press release when they want to announce, like, hey, look, we're doing something great, but they can't put one out to tell you what's happening with your power. So one of the things that was cited in their decision to not allow them to lower their reliability standards was all of your public comments. So I know everybody's tired of submitting public comments to PUCO, but it was cited multiple times in their decision about how much Lakewood residents have suffered and how unacceptable it is. So it is important that we all keep raising our voices as well.
As Lakewood's fight with its electric utility ramped up, city leaders and residents started floating more aggressive tactics. Watch how Councilmember Bullock's energy expertise and a creative escrow idea became part of the strategy to turn up the pressure.
Absolutely. And let me thank all of City Council for your support and your partnership. And as we've tackled this together, I want to recognize all of you. And I do want to call out one council member in particular, which is Tom Bullock, who has a lot of experience in our energy and has been quite helpful as we look to fight with PUCO and some of this. So I want to compliment him as well.
Yeah, thank you, everyone, for giving me a few minutes. I came here specifically to ask that you guys look into this idea of an escrow account. I think that is the most effective method that we can use, especially for a publicly traded utility. If they start to get nervous about the amount of revenue, if we build in covenants to say, if you don't meet certain timelines, some of this money in this escrow is coming back, I think we have a much stronger ability to bring them to heel. So I'm glad to hear that. Thank you very much. And if there's anything that we can do, please keep telling us, suggestions and that kind of thing around comments and that sort of thing. A coordinated voice, I think, is very valuable. Thank you.
One resident who often clashed with City Hall showed up with both unexpected praise and a warning about street changes in their neighborhood. Hear how this comment tried to reshape a multimodal project before someone got hurt.
Hello, Matt Herberger, 1448 Bunce Road. I'm not here to talk about First Energy, but I will say I've had many disagreements with the city and the administration, but I will give credit to the mayor. I think you're doing an outstanding job holding First Energy to account, and Pook, and I do. I have many disagreements, but on that front, I think you're doing a great job. For those of you, some of you know me, I live on Bunce Road. There's a multimodal project going in, and I've been opposed to it, as have many of my neighbors, and it's proceeding as planned. I came across an idea that even the planning director will like, because it's easy. Swap the sidewalk for the tree lawn and the tree lawn for the multimodal path on my street. So you extend my yard out further, you plant the trees there, and the multimodal path is adjacent to the roadway. And I think we need to get out ahead of it and make sure that we've got regulations in place, or we've got ideas about how we control it to make sure people are safe. Because God forbid, like at Hilliard and Madison, too late we find out, hey, we built something, we expected people to follow the rules, they didn't, and someone dies, someone's injured.
Those fast electric bikes you've seen kids riding on the sidewalk were already on City Council's radar. Councilmember Keppel described why these e-mopeds raised alarms and hinted at moves the city could make before someone gets seriously hurt.
They're sort of the updated version of the mopeds that, for those of us that are old enough to remember mopeds, but we're seeing children riding them, and they go way faster than the level 1, 2, and 3 e-bikes. You know, might go 20 miles an hour, 20 miles an hour. Some of those these are have throttles and can go way faster than that, and they're going fast on the sidewalk and in places that is very dangerous. So we did have conversation about that tonight too, about not necessarily waiting till we have the full shared use path regulation done to take some action on those, because they are just kind of exploding, and I think a lot of parents aren't realizing they're being marketed to them as e-bikes, but they're really essentially electric mopeds. And you know, back in the day, you had to have a specific license, you had to be a certain age. So there are potential actions we can take with that too. But so that is, I think, one of the things we're all seeing all of a sudden is they're just kind of appearing everywhere, and particularly on the sidewalks, and it can be very dangerous for folks, pedestrians, and people with disabilities and seniors.
A Lakewood resident who had lived on the same street for over 50 years came forward with a troubling story about a neglected hoarder house that never seemed to get fixed. This moment put long-simmering questions about property maintenance, rats, and city enforcement right in front of City Hall.
My name's Dennis Kowecki. I live on 2160 Morrison. And the reason I'm here is on my street, we're having problems. I've talked to people, called up at the City Hall here. I've been in the city of Lakewood for 53 years at the same residence. So I've been around when they collected garbage from the back. That was great. But in the meantime, somewhere along the line, Lakewood's lost its oomph to take care of, to watch over properties. What I have on my street is a house that's been bad for 53 years. Well, guess what? The gentleman finally died. He was a hoarder, okay. That was about 4 years ago. The house is still there. The only thing that's happened, it got painted. Nothing else has happened to it. Just wondering when it's going to be taken care of and why we can't get it going. I mean, the rats in the backyard, garbage in the backyard. And you know how a backyard is when it's not taken care of and you got trees. It's just a mess.
After that emotional story about a neglected house, City Hall did not just let it slide. This moment showed how a council member stepped in and how the resident pushed back, worried the city was still too hesitant to act.
After the city council meeting, I'll take down your name and address and your contact information, and I'll pass it along to the building commissioner for you.
It's like everybody's afraid to press them, it seems like, from the city. That's all right if there's nobody there. Well, it's not all right.
That's our rundown from the council, from budget priorities and zoning tweaks to e-bike rules, charter changes, short-term rentals, and a big push on power reliability and federal grant rules. The council clearly has more work ahead on these issues, so keep an eye on future meetings and check back here for the next set of highlights.
Thank you for watching CGov.